There is no guarantee that any will work. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation will fund the manufacture of 7 potential vaccines. Despite the fact billions of dollars could be wasted, maybe 1 or 2 will actually be successful. But Bill Gates argues losing $1 billion is better than the global economy losing trillions of dollars. The United States has set aside $27 billion, including for the development of vaccines. It bet almost $500 million on drug maker Moderna to deliver its COVID-19 vaccine, which is already in trials. Tech startup Benevolent AI has unleashed its artificial intelligence power to fund existing drugs that may be used in the fight against this pandemic. It's identified a rheumatoid arthritis drug from Eli Lilly that may do the job. It's just one of many drugs, though, that are in trials right now. And it's not just the Western world that has the scientific know-how to beat the virus. In Senegal, a laboratory has used its AIDS and Ebola experience to develop a $1 COVID-19 testing kit. Al Jazeera's Nicholas Hawk has more.
Senegal is doing what most countries can't, testing everyone, symptoms or not, entering a health center for the novel coronavirus. It has no shortage of testing kit thanks to this lab at the Institut Pasteur. Researchers are developing a $1 quick diagnostic kit, originally made to test for dengue fever. Patients drop blood or saliva onto the devices and wait for a bloodline to appear, like a pregnancy test, explains researcher Amadou Sall.
There is no need for a highly equipped lab. It's a simple test that can be done anywhere. The idea is to rapidly produce 2 to 4 million kits, not just for us, but for African countries, so that we can detect and isolate patients quickly.
The sick are administered a cheap anti-malarial drug called chloroquine, commonly found in sub-Saharan Africa where malaria is endemic. While the World Health Organization cautions the use of it, Dakar-born scientist Didier Raoult says it's an affordable treatment for poor African countries dealing with the outbreak.
Hydroxychloroquine is clearing the virus from the respiratory system, probably making that people are no more contagious and no more sick.
With only 50 ventilator machines for 16 million people, Senegalese engineers are using a 3D printing machine to produce more. While imported ventilators cost $16,000, this one is just $60. Senegal is counting the cost, and it's paying off. More than a month into the outbreak, the small West African nation suffered only 2 deaths, with most patients treated healed. Senegal has the largest rate of recovery in patients infected with the coronavirus in Africa, the 3rd in the world, ahead of countries like the United States and France. And while it has a tiny health budget compared to those countries, it has a wealth of experience in dealing with infectious diseases and outbreaks. Over 3,000 children died of pneumonia last year in Senegal, thousands more from malaria. Coronavirus is one of many deadly infections the country is dealing with. Lessons learned from the AIDS epidemic, the recent Ebola outbreak, were key in Senegal's strategy in dealing with the pandemic.
I'm optimistic because some measures are taken already. Closing the airport, no imported case coming in the country, limitation of movement, confinement of people from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. I think those things can help.
These measures were taken when there were less than 100 cases. Scientific modeling predicted tens of thousands of infections and hundreds of deaths. But this has not happened. Early detection and African-led research means Senegal is so far beating the odds. Nicholas Hawk, Al Jazeera, Dakar.
Now, there are no drugs to treat COVID-19. Enterprising pharmaceutical companies, though, are using existing drugs to help those seriously affected by the pathogen. Al Jazeera's Rob Reynolds caught up with the chief executive of U.S. drug maker Cytidine. This drug has been used on ventilated patients with a high degree of success. Rob began by asking Dr. Nader Pouhassan about the results of the trials and how far off it was from getting regulatory approval.
Leronlimab is a humanized monoclonal antibody that was used for the HIV indication for the last 20 years or so. We're about ready to finalize our application for final approval from FDA. Have been used for over 840 patients with 0 serious adverse events. When coronavirus hit the world, our doctors, Dr. Bruce Patterson, expert in the mechanism of action of our product, indicated that we will not be able to be a vaccine, nor we can stop people from getting coronavirus with this product. However, the main reason the patients have mortality and morbidity is because the ARDS, which is caused by coronavirus in lungs, causes death in patients. And he said that the cytokine storm is what causes ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome. And he believed that this is the solution. So when we first filed for emergency IND through Dr. Harish Sidham from Montefiore Medical School, Albert Einstein College of Medicine, the FDA also was questioning whether this could have any impact. The first two patients, one of them self-intubated and came aware of, came out of the sedation that he was under, and was able to self-extubate. Then we injected 9 more patients in that same hospital immediately, and 4 patients who extubated, 2 of them got discharged. Then other doctors in South California used it. 11 patients, majority got very well, and the patients that got discharged, they were very much happy. So they went to media, they start talking to CBS, I believe, and they said that my life was saved. Then more patients started wanting the product, and we realized that this is really working out very well for everybody. So we asked FDA for a phase 2. They immediately gave us a green light for that. We asked for a phase 3 in a severe population of coronavirus. They also gave us a green light for that. And we are now close to asking the FDA to approve the drug for compassionate use for everybody who's in severe condition, because our mechanism of action, which we will be publishing a paper, hopefully by the end of this week or so, will show that the way to stop this virus is to stop it from killing people through ARDS in the lungs. And we are happy to see some positive result, and we are going to continuously enroll in both of the trials that we have also.
So if the FDA gives you final approval, would that also apply to other countries? Would it be good enough for the European Union or other countries to go ahead and start using the medication?
So each country has their own rules and regulation. United Kingdom has asked us already for the product to be involved in this test that we have. They have indicated that the European Food and Drug Administration is agreeing to allow this product to be used in any clinical trial, as long as the FDA in United States agrees to allow the clinical trials to go forward and have a green light. We have green light not for phase 2, but also for one phase 3, a final pivotal trial, we believe. And the other countries also always, they follow the guidelines of FDA in United States and the European Food and Drug Administration. So if both of these are aligned, then the rest of the world would also immediately would allow us to be used for this special problem.
Can you give us any update on how the search for a vaccine against the coronavirus might be going?
In vaccine, just imagine if we were going to say, okay, we have a product, we believe it has gone through most of the tests, we want to test it now for final test. Well, you're going to take at least 2,000 people, give them perhaps the vaccine. Now, if 1,000 of them are in placebo and 1,000 are in a drug, then you're going to have to wait to see who gets exposed to coronavirus and who survives, who doesn't. That process is very lengthy. And that's why the United States media has been correctly indicating that the vaccine, Dr. Fauci has also indicated that will take some time. It takes usually 5 to 10 years, but in this case, they're cutting through a lot of regulation to make it available, hopefully in 1 year, if they have something that works.
How can we ensure in the future that we don't have a double-tiered system where wealthy countries and their residents have access to drugs that fight COVID-19, but people who live in impoverished countries with weak public health infrastructure go without?
In the United States, we have Bill Gates Foundation, NIH, National Institute of Health Foundation, reserve fundings. We have AMFOR that has funding, BARDA has funding. So all these funds that could be used to disperse this product without any cost to the third world countries is going to be at work immediately. I have been approached already by a couple of those institution, and they are saying that your science look very strong, your results look strong. If it happens that you get approval, which could happen in the next perhaps 6 to 8 weeks even, if those best case scenario happen, can we be involved to immediately have this product available for third world country? And we said absolutely yes. They asked us for the cost of the product. The cost is very minimum. It's not very large, and we are able to cover the whole world. We have our manufacturing at Samsung Biologic in South Korea said where they could produce tremendous amount of product, and we have manufacturing in the United States ready to go. Everything's set. We need the FDA approval, and we needed to have some proof of concept. Things are going very well with the patients who have received this product in emergency IND and reported it, but the trial is double-blinded. We don't know the results for another 2 or 3 weeks, and then we will know what path we have to take.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
A pandemic, a global glut, and a lack of storage, the perfect storm that sent U.S. oil prices into negative territory for the first time ever. Traders are forced to pay buyers to take the oil off their hands. With oil at historic lows, the U.S. oil industry is paying a heavy price, with many companies filing for bankruptcy. Al Jazeera's John Hendren reports from Chicago.
Across American oil country, the pumps are shutting down. Since the coronavirus locked much of the Western world in their homes, the floor has dropped out of the oil market.
There's a gas station selling gasoline for 99 cents a gallon. Now, you would think, wow, that's just great. And everybody will go run. I mean, there was a line of people there to fill their cars up. The question is, where are you going to go?
The price of the benchmark American crude, West Texas Intermediate, has collapsed from $60 a barrel in January to below $20 in the past week. Across the U.S., the price at the pump is lower than it's been in years, but even at rush hour, few are buying. The International Energy Agency says the world's appetite for oil hasn't been this low since 1995. Especially hit hard, the fracking industry that turned the U.S. oil industry into a net exporter since 2011. Fracking companies, which break rocks to find fuel, need oil above $30 a barrel to make a profit.
It's not just that oil company. It's the oil service companies. It's the little towns in the oil patch that, the motels, the diners, restaurants, those types of things. The ripple effect is tremendous when you move out from the oil and gas company and all the ancillary companies that provide them services and parts. So I'm afraid it's going to be ugly.
The first casualty came on April 1st. Denver-based Whiting Petroleum declared bankruptcy. If prices don't increase soon, Whiting will likely become only the first of hundreds of oil and related companies to do so.
Right now, the pandemic, they're like, well, it's closed down. It's a stop. We're not doing anything until June 1st, or we're not doing anything until, May, whatever. So it's just kind of a day-by-day situation.
So the oil industry waits and worries until all the pumps return to service. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Chicago.
So despite OPEC's record production cut, oil prices have fallen further. Has the oil cartel lost its ability to manage prices? Let's ask Raja Kapoor. He's an oil analyst and managing director of oil and gas at AWR Lloyd. We appreciate your time very much, Raja. So what about that? What role can or should OPEC have been playing in this? I mean, how much power do they really have right now? What is their influence?
When you talk about the OPEC from the producer side, whilst they do have considerable amount of clout, you've got to realize that ultimately the market has to be balanced by primarily the consumers and the producers. But what we're largely seeing, and with what was reflective of the negative prices on the 20th at the WTI, was more a factor of the constraint in the supply chain, in the storage infrastructure. So OPEC has agreed, as you've said, OPEC++, which includes Russia and other countries, including Mexico, have agreed for a price cut up to 9.7 million barrels of crude a day. But on the demand side of things, we are seeing that there is a drop in demand, which is much, much more. At times, by some analysts, IEA says that the demand drop for crude for the month of April is going to be 30 million barrels of crude a day. Now, you juxtapose that against a drop or a cut of 10 million barrels or thereabouts. That's not much. You still have a huge supply cut that remains, which does not find its way, or which cannot find its way to consumers, because that market has suddenly evaporated.
So what we're seeing with everything that has fallen off the cliff, basically with WTI, do you think that's also going to happen with Brent, which is the international benchmark? I mean, you're talking about this oversupply is a problem that everybody is having. So what do you think is going to happen with Brent prices?
WTI fall in 20th was, as you've said, an anomaly. Minus $37 per barrel was to do because the crude futures for May had to be closed off, had to be squared off on May 20th, and there was no place in Cushing, Oklahoma to take those additional barrels. That is a peculiarity of WTI, where the crude has to be stored only in one place, Cushing, Oklahoma. Brent that way has a little bit more leeway because physical storage of Brent can take place not just in one location, but on various locations. Coming back to your point, would Brent follow or would fall off the cliff as WTI has? I think the answer to that is a general slowdown in all other countries, the world in general. IMF came out with some numbers. For 2020, they're expecting the world to contract at 3% per annum. That means last year it was a 3% growth. This year, they're looking at a 3% contraction.
What is the relationship between OPEC and what do they care about what's happening with the shale industry in the U.S.?
But I think they're directly linked because in a very real world, both of them are producing crude and at different stages in life are competing for the consumer refineries. Now, as we know, the cost of producing crude in the US, especially in the shale patch, is much higher than the cost of producing crude in any of the APEC consumer countries. So when crude falls off the cliff, today we are looking at about $20 per barrel of Brent crude, which has fallen down from near about $68 per barrel start of this year. Whilst this is going to bleed the producer countries in the OPEC, it is also going to bleed the shale oil patch in North America, not just the US, but Canada as well, because their cost of producing crude on a per barrel basis is much higher. Now, whether they'll be able to survive the storm, it looks very difficult because we've already seen shale companies, and I was just hearing you a few minutes back where you spoke about companies going into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And we will see more of this happening because at least for this year, the improvement in crude prices will not be that dramatic. We're all hoping that it does not bottom out, that it does not go below the current levels of 22 barrels, and it will increase. But how much of an increase will it be? That remains to be seen. To kind of end with the point, the biggest sufferers there would be the North American unconventional producers, whose cost of production is much higher than the rest of the world.
All right, oil and gas analyst at AWR Lloyd, Rajat Kapoor. Rajat, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As the world throws out the rule book and spends trillions of dollars to avoid a total collapse of economies, is it time to consider stimulus that can carry us beyond this crisis? Remembering that we do have a climate change challenge to save the human race. What the lockdown has proven, the natural world will go on without us and take back the streets. While many nations have targets to reduce pollution, the money tells us otherwise. In fact, $250 billion in green bonds were issued last year. It does sound like a lot, but added to what's already out there, that's less than 0.1% of the total government debt, which stands at $9 trillion worldwide. When we talk about green bonds, they work in the same way as others, but are specifically used for environmental and climate-related projects. So should government spend billions in stimulus via green bonds? Joining me now via Skype from London is Paul Simpson from the nonprofit environmental consultancy, CDP. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you joining us, Paul. So right now, governments around the world are putting together stimulus packages worth billions and billions of dollars. Is this an opening, an opportunity for green bonds to get a foot in and to grow?
I mean, clearly the pandemic is, primarily a health crisis that is causing an enormous economic crisis, one not seen since really the Great Depression, the First and Second World Wars, so the last 100 years. Governments are, in the very short term, taking emergency measures to shore up their economies, businesses and jobs. But as more work is done on the recovery and renewal of the economy as we emerge from this crisis, then absolutely governments need to be thinking about how are their stimulus packages their loans, their support for companies. How is that helping the transition to a low carbon and sustainable economy? We're in a critical decade for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, to deliver the Paris Agreement. So governments need to be planning with their central banks, working with large institutional investors to, in the renewal process of the economy, build a more sustainable and resilient economy.
Is this about truly, though, a reimagination of economies? I mean, really, truly changing things, not just Band-Aid measures. I mean, does this look like changing jobs, changing industries, creating jobs?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the climate and ecological emergency, pre-COVID, has required a transition in the global economy, a very substantial one. Many governments and economies have really begun that. It's underway, but it needs to be delivered this decade. The pandemic, which really is unprecedented in scale of global impact, reveals that the global economy and society is not as resilient as it should be. We need to invest more in healthcare. We need to build more resilience and address gross inequality. Inequality creates weakness in the system. So I think this can be a real catalyst for greater stakeholder capitalism, where capitalism, businesses, investors, governments think more about the whole, and also then to really catalyze the green economy, the sustainable economy. Governments are investing trillions of dollars in shoring up their economy now, and there will be more long-term packages for renewal. They need to have climate targets in line with the Paris Agreement within them. Businesses that are being bailed out, getting loans, other stimulus should have some form of long-term, not necessarily immediate, requirements, and that will benefit the economy. The new climate economy, a group of the world's largest economists, shows that by investing in the climate transition, we can, in the next decade, unleash $26 trillion of growth opportunities and bring 65 million jobs to the market. The UN International Labour Organization shows the transition to a low carbon economy will have a net benefit on jobs. So there is an opportunity to governments to bring the recovery and renewal packages, which will be diverse, some very short term, but particularly the longer term packages to drive this transition towards a net zero economy.
Where is the leadership for that? I mean, COP is not happening this year, which, obviously makes sense. We don't want crowds of big people, but even still, the U.S. has been pulling further and further back from this, the international dialogue that everybody has about climate change. So who or where's the leadership to make these things happen?
Pre-COVID, this year was meant to be a critical year on climate action. As you say, with COP26 being now delayed until 2021, the right decision so we can have a high ambition COP. Yeah, there's going to be some delays, but we absolutely have a lot of leadership. The EU has been very clear that there will be a Green New Deal and that will be integrated into the stimulus packages. We see through CDP more than 8,500 companies disclosing on climate change and their environmental impacts. Some 870 companies committed to a science-based target to reduce their emissions in line with the Paris Agreement and 1.5. So we've been building up leadership since 2015 with the Paris Agreement. Some of that will be a little bit delayed, but I think as we hopefully come into 2021 with this recovery and renewal, we will have an opportunity to bring together health, resilience, addressing inequality, and driving the great transition towards net zero emissions.
Paul Simpson joining us from London with the environmental consultancy nonprofit, that is CDP. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
That is our show for this week. Get in touch with us by tweeting me at Rochelle Carey. Very easy to find. When you do, use the hashtag AJCTC. Also, drop us an email, accountingthecost@aljazeera.net. Very easy address to find. Also, go online to aljazeera.com/CTC. It'll take you straight to our page. There's individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on. That's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I am Rochelle Carey from the entire team. Thank you for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.